Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. We like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. Today we're welcoming Kendra, a real estate agent and A-frame cabin owner in Lake Almanor, California, who brings a uniquely practical perspective to the world of cabin ownership. From her family's deep roots in real estate investment to managing her own A-frame in an HOA-controlled community, Kendra shares valuable insights on the financial realities of cabin ownership in today's market. We'll explore how she transformed her 3-level A-frame with strategic renovations, discovered her unexpected guest demographic, and navigates the challenges of operating a seasonal property. Whether you're considering buying a vacation property, curious about the impact of HOA regulations on short-term rentals, or interested in the nuts and bolts of real estate investment strategy, this conversation offers both practical wisdom and honest reflection. We'll dive into everything from the tax advantages of making your children employees of your LLC to the surprising disparity between projected and actual rental income, and why thinking long-term might be the smartest approach in today's challenging market. Let's do it. It's so nice to meet you.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Can you start by telling us where you are? Give us a sense of where you are right now and also kind of where your property is.
Okay, so we live in Chico, California, which is like north of Sacramento, about an hour and a half in the valley.
Okay.
And then our cabin is east of us, about another hour and a half, like 75 miles east of us, in Lake Almanor. That is the region where the Sierra Nevadas mountain range meets the Cascade mountain range. So
Okay.
we're kind of on the north end of the Sierra Nevadas.
I know very little about California cabin culture. So when it comes to like overall vibe and energy of that area, can you describe that a little bit to me?
So I didn't grow up going to cabins. I grew up like camping. So the cabin culture is like new for us. We don't really know other people that have cabins. We were kind of the first ones. Our
Mhm.
friends just bought a place in Truckee after us. And then I've met people in our neighborhood that live in Chico that are kind of young families like us too. So, yeah, a lot of people go up there for the lake and such. And I think we're more camping based, but you know, I don't feel like we have the cabin culture like you guys do on the East Coast.
Well, that's what I'm always curious about because there are a lot of cabins out west and especially like Portland, Oregon, like that area. But I don't have a clear vibe of like, is it sort of like I'm picturing like New Mexico-y, where it's like not super green, but more deserty. But I know that's further south. But in California, there are areas that are like that. So I'm just not clear on like what those areas are
Okay,
like.
so we're in the valley. Chico is like sea level, a little bit above sea level. So it gets really hot here in the summer. We don't get any snow here in Chico. We're in the valley. It's a lot of agriculture based area. So that's probably what most people think of Chico. We have a lot of almond orchards, walnut orchards,
Yes.
and rice
Yes.
fields.
Yes.
So that's kind of what our terrain looks like. But then the
Okay.
cabin, yeah, we just go an hour and a half east and you're in a total different realm. We definitely get the 4 seasons up at our cabin, and our cabin sits at 4,500 feet elevation.
I feel like this explains why cabin culture is a thing, right? Because I've driven through most of California and I've seen those drastic shifts, like
Mhm.
especially from like Southern California up. And I feel like what it does when you can drive just an hour and a half to 2 hours and get a completely different experience, 4 seasons, trees, etc. That
Mhm.
I think helps for me to understand the escape element of it in that environment.
Right, right. So yeah, I can think a lot of people in California think the Bay Area, San Francisco, cities, Los Angeles, but then the Sierra Nevadas basically run the east side of the state, almost the whole length
Yeah.
of the state.
Yeah.
So yeah, California is nice in that within a couple hours you can go from the coast, the beach, or to the mountains.
Right, which is similar to North Carolina. We live
Okay,
smack dab in the middle of the state, but
okay.
it's also a very different coastal culture, I feel like, from California to North Carolina. But a lot of folks live in the middle of the state and then either have beach houses
Mhm.
or cabins, depending which direction you prefer to
Okay.
drive. But Kendra, what I find so interesting in your pre-interview, you're the first person. So first of all, this is our 100th episode, which is kind of hard to
Oh,
believe.
cool. Okay.
And out of 100, you're the first person who defined cabin culture in the context of the people who own and hosted them instead of the experience that it provides, right? So I think, to give you an example, people are often like seclusion, it's about escape, it's about quiet. And yours said that it was a network of cabin owners and enthusiasts. And I really like that because I think that's absolutely true. And it shows which part of cabin culture is more top of mind for us at that particular moment. And I will admit, I'm curious if you feel this way. Cabin culture for me was an escape until I owned one and started hosting at one. And then it became less of that escape because you're always working there. And so the culture about it actually came like more with sharing it with other people, which is how
Mhm.
you described it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Because when I think of cabin culture and like your page and your podcast, I think it's more of a collective group of people like me that own cabins or that love going to them, um,
Yeah.
or that enjoy seeing the content or kind of what it stands for to like own a cabin
Yeah.
or go to a cabin.
Yeah.
Um,
Because it's like such an individual experience often. Maybe this isn't true, but like that like reconnection, I guess it could be like with another person or your family, but it's like smaller. It's not as shareable as this community aspect of it is,
mhm,
right? And
mhm.
that feels like for me is more top of mind because I get less of that reconnection the more work that we're doing at
I
the
know.
cabin. How long did it take you? But this is interesting for me, and part of why I love this community so much is because I started hosting like 10 years ago and had no community. I was the only one that I knew of with a cabin, and I don't know if I felt alone at the time because I didn't know any different, but comparing it to where we are now, I look back and I'm like, that must have been really lonely. How long did you find this community before you bought a cabin and that inspired you to do it? Or did you buy a cabin and then you found the community?
So what we bought the cabin, and then I think right after I bought the cabin, I started my Instagram page, and I knew we were going to do a remodel before we started hosting. So I started sharing, I think, more of our remodel and our beginning stages on the
Yeah.
Instagram before I was even close to hosting, and that kind of helped connect with other hosts and other cabin
Yeah.
owners. And that's actually where I drew my biggest inspiration was from other cabin owners and Instagram, and a lot of them gave me little feedback here and there, especially when I first started hosting and you're nervous, your first few guests, and
Yeah.
somebody was like, oh,
Yeah.
the first three are the hardest, but then it'll get easier after that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So yeah, it was after the fact, but I definitely pulled a lot of inspiration from other cabin owners and hosts on
Yeah.
Instagram.
A lot of folks wait to launch their Instagram until they have a finished product to show. What experiences have you had that taught you, nope, I should start now. I should document the renovation part of this process?
Well, I've always been into home renovations, so that's something that's like, a passion of mine. So I've
Yeah.
always shared on my other projects online and stuff like that. So it's kind of natural for me.
Yeah.
I think I do have pictures on my Instagram where we had like this a blow up couch for a little bit before I even ordered my furniture. But I know a lot of people do like seeing the renovations, and I like seeing other
Yeah.
people's renovations too. So we bought the cabin, mostly for ourselves to enjoy. So I know other people buy their short-term rentals strictly for an investment, but
Right.
ours is a little different. So I made it, that we could enjoy it too, and then I would share it with others. But yeah, I didn't think of this community when I created my Instagram. I mean, I think I must have started following other cabin owners on my other Instagram account, my personal account. And I was like, oh, I can do this. I'll start one too. And then
Yeah.
it's been a really cool network.
Yeah. I think there's I feel like two groups of people often when it comes to documenting your cabin, and there's some people who are way more comfortable with the renovation aspect of it, the imperfection that comes with that. And then once it's finished and it's just marketing or selling, it becomes way less comfortable. And then there's other folks who are just really hesitant to share any of the renovation because it feels imperfect and things are going wrong. And how do I share that publicly? But are very comfortable when it's finished sharing the marketing pieces. I feel like you're in, well, actually, I don't mean to say that you're uncomfortable once it's done. I am firmly in camp 1. Instagram was such an easy place for me during the build, and it became trickier for me after the build because I was like, well, now I'm just trying to like convince people this place is awesome, which feels less comfortable. Is that so? I just think it's interesting that you documented the renovation.
Well, it's kind of interesting you bring that up because I really haven't been active on Instagram the last 2 months. I don't know if you noticed that or not, but not on purpose or anything, but I guess I just have other stuff going on in my life. And
Yeah.
I think it is because it's our slow season and I haven't actually gone up there in almost 2 months. So I don't really have any new content to share. And I've just kind of
Yeah.
slipped that priority,
Yeah.
which makes me, I'm like, I need to kind of get more on it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I always kind of have learned to take clips when I go up there and try and share. Kind of another interesting thing is I want to start sharing more of my kids there. So I recently made my kids employees of our LLC. So now they're kind of going to help me with marketing. So they get paid for that. So
Okay, but this is like a financial strategy too, isn't it?
mhm.
Because I've been seeing, I get fed a lot of finance content because I'm really interested in that. And I've been seeing a lot of reels where it's like, I mean, I don't have kids, so I don't watch them in their entirety too much, but I've seen this popping up a lot. Like, isn't this like a smart, I don't know if it's a tax write-off or like, but it is a financial strategy, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a financial strategy. So we opened up Roth IRAs for our kids, and you can pay them as they can earn money in their Roth IRA as long as they're employed. So because we have the company, the LLC, I can pay them through that into their
Oh.
retirement. So you
Oh,
have to be
interesting.
within certain thresholds.
Yeah.
Um, certain income thresholds, but we meet that threshold. So yeah, it's just yeah, that's a tax benefit of owning a cabin and owning like a small business.
This is so tricky. So you're a realtor, so I definitely wanna talk more about real estate
Okay.
because I'm very
Yeah.
interested in that, and it's rare we get real estate agents on here. Um, but recently it is tax season, and I just got hit with my taxes, and it was insane, and I found myself so frustrated because I feel like there's so many ways that, like, and then right now we're hearing a lot about the billionaires, but, like, that really rich people are, like, figuring out how to manipulate taxes, and then someone who's, like, solidly middle class is getting hit with, like, insane tax bills. And so I feel like it's gotten me more interested in like, okay, I don't want to cheat taxes by any means, but like what are the things that are built in to incentivize you to do certain things that can then help you save on taxes? This feels like one of them.
So my accountant actually recently asked me how many days of personal use we used at the cabin, and he's like, it doesn't include when you're cleaning or like doing maintenance or working on it. And I was like, well, pretty much every
0.
day there, yeah. I was like, maybe Christmas Day and Thanksgiving Day, right? But I was
Right.
like, every time we go up there, I have a carload of supplies I'm bringing. I'm always
Right.
cleaning it after I've leave, and we always have like a to-do list of stuff when we're up there. So
Right.
it's always been a lot of work. It's a lot more work than I expected, especially because
And
our
taking
cabin is
content.
big. Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
on Christmas Day, if you're relaxing, you're probably taking at least one
Yeah.
photo that you're then
Yeah.
going to use. Therefore, you are working on that
Yeah.
one day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot of tax advantages of owning real estate, not just a short-term rental with the depreciation and the write-offs. But so, yeah, and our cabin is a little different than other people's investment is that we are not cash flowing yet. I'm still operating in the red, which was not my goal by any means. I had hoped
Yeah.
to break even. So it's been a little bit more of a struggle. A lot of people think that I'm making more money than I am because they
Yeah.
look at my property on AirDNA, and that is
Oh, interesting.
skewed. It's skewed.
Yeah. Well, and it tells part of the story. It tells the income side of it, but the expenses are so personalized because it's so dependent on like how much did you put down? What were the interest rates? What do your monthly payments look like? How much are you putting into repairs, renovations, etc.? I actually think this might be really helpful to talk about this as much as you're comfortable because I do feel like what's put out on Instagram and in other places is very like buy, 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 so much money. Short-term rentals are the best. And especially in this real estate market, it is getting trickier to turn the kind of profit that it was when interest rates were at like 2.5%.
Yeah.
So can you speak a little bit to maybe just like what surprises did you find going into this? What were you expecting? And then what did you run into that people might be able to learn from?
So we bought when interest rates were like 3%. That's what our interest rate
Okay.
is. So we bought
Amazing.
We bought right before, like 4 months before things jumped up and changed. So we bought it when you could get the interest rate comparable to your primary home on
Mhm.
your second home, which they got rid of like 4 months later. Also in California, I don't know, probably you're gonna experience it in North Carolina or is insurance issues. A lot of people here have to get the California Fair Plan now, especially in these like forested areas and mountain
Mm.
areas. And people are paying 6, 7 grand minimum for their insurance. And
Yeah.
we got in with USAA. My husband's a veteran, so I only pay like 1,400 a year for our insurance, which is
Oh,
super
wow.
low compared to anybody else that I know of.
Wow. Yeah.
So I feel like our expenses are really low compared to what somebody else would be buying right now with our
Yeah.
low interest rates and our insurance. I think my income, so AirDNA reports my income being like 2 to almost 3 times what it actually is. So
Why? This
I
makes me not trust anything I see.
yeah, I don't trust AirDNA now that I look up your own oh, I don't know if yours, Zach, but I think because I blocked out a lot for personal use,
Yeah.
and
It's
so it
assuming that those are blocked for like your occupancy is
yeah.
higher than it is. Yeah.
Yes. And it also reports my daily average is higher than it is. I don't know
Yeah.
why. So I don't trust what I see online anymore. But I think my expenses are a minimum. I do have more expenses with upkeep than I anticipated. My tree work. I'm constantly doing tree work, and that's my
Mhm.
biggest expense. We have a beetle that kills the trees, and so I'm constantly removing dead trees, which I have
And then
more.
are you replanting new ones or just the cost to
I'm
remove the
not.
dead ones?
I'm not
Yeah, because that's
replanting.
also expensive.
Yeah, so I don't have any irrigation really on our property, but I mean, we do have new shoots coming up. But yeah, that's been my biggest expense. And I did have a little water leak last year, so which could have been way worse. It wasn't that bad,
Yeah,
but it's just like little maintenance like that
yeah,
that you don't really anticipate when you're
right.
running numbers. And then yeah, we're really seasonal up here. People really just come to our area in the summer. The winter it's pretty dead, so I hardly get any bookings through the winter and spring.
There's no skiing or anything.
We don't know. There's no skiing,
That's too
unfortunately.
bad.
We're kind of like right at the cutoff where we start to get snow, but there's not quite enough snow for
Yeah,
skiing. We have some little ski hills, but you'd have to make your own snow. So
yeah,
Tahoe is about at least another 2,000 feet, 2 to 3 plus thousand feet. And I mean, a lot of those resorts make their own snow, but yeah, our area would be totally different if we did have a ski resort or
right,
something like that.
right. That
Yeah.
makes a big difference for off season or there isn't an off season
Yeah.
anymore. I am curious to get your perspective as a real estate agent because so much of this, so you obviously have personal experience in short-term rentals, but you also have a background in long-term rentals and you're a
Mhm,
real estate agent. So
mhm.
can you take me back to like when obviously you have you've been involved with just like housing in
Yeah,
general.
yeah.
When did that start for you? I find usually it's a family thing. Like
Mhm.
if you invest in real estate, it's
Yeah.
typically someone else did and showed you how. Is that what happened for you?
Yes, so my grandparents were real estate investors, and my grandfather invested in commercial real estate in Southern
Okay.
California, which my family still owns today, mostly like nursing homes and other commercial properties like
Yeah.
that. My grandmother liked flipping homes and more like
Mhm.
residential and rentals. So when I graduated college, she gifted me with one of her rentals that I think she had kind of bought it for me, but she gifted it to me when I graduated. And it was in Southern California. So she encouraged me to sell it and buy up here in Chico because Chico is relatively inexpensive compared
Mhm.
to where our housing is almost like half what the average in California is.
Yeah.
So you get a lot more bang for your buck up here. And we're a college town, so we have a good influx of tenants.
Yep.
So I started long-term rentals. We still have a few long-term rentals here in town in Chico, but
How
then
old were you when that happened, when she gifted that to you?
I was 21.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just trying to imagine, like, because I love this, because I mean, grandparents leave inheritance to folks, but to say, like, I love flipping houses, I'm gonna flip one, but you're going to get the benefit of it, but I
Mhm.
want you to actually sell it and then flip your own or invest in
Mhm.
your own in a different location.
Mhm.
Like, what a way to hand that gift down. And at
Right.
21 to be set up with your first one and begin to realize the power of investing in real estate.
Yeah, I don't even looking back, I don't even think knew what I didn't know what I was doing, you know?
Yeah.
So I just kinda went with it. I would always my dad was a contractor, and my mom had been a real estate agent as well for a little bit, so I always had that housing background.
Yeah.
So I always loved real estate. I think because it's tangible
Yeah.
and it's something that you can improve on, like, I don't
Yeah.
the stocks never interest me, other investments, but,
They're
um
so boring.
and that was during the recession, so we bought homes my husband we bought other homes during the recession, which have all basically doubled in value and created a lot of
Yeah.
wealth for us,
Yeah.
and so it's so easy for us to look back and be like, that those were life-changing just that just changed our lives just buying real estate in the recession.
Yeah. What would you say as someone who knows the market really well? Because I can imagine I also bought earlier when interest rates were low. Airbnb was like brand new. And so there was a lot of opportunity in it. And we're at a different place now. Airbnb is getting more saturated. It also is getting, it's been around long enough that people have complaints about it. And so in some ways, it's like, up and down in terms of just general like PR. And interest rates have gone up so much that it becomes harder to do with real estate what you could do 10 years ago.
For
What
sure.
would you recommend to folks who are wanting to get into it, but it feels really intimidating at this particular moment?
It's really gotta make sense for that individual and that individual's finances, and obviously, in today's market, you probably have to put more down payment down to make the numbers work for you.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's definitely a struggle, especially for those first time home buyers or people that don't have a lot of cash, or the people who have just waited because it was a lot easier to buy even just a couple years ago than it is now.
Right.
But there are different solutions. A lot of people are creative with how much they can put down. I would probably if you're first time buying real estate, I would maybe look for like the multifamily properties where you can live in one and rent the other to offset your
Yeah.
mortgage. It might not cover your mortgage completely, but at least it's covering some of it and you're getting your
Yeah.
foot in the door. So, yeah, we are actually planning to sell one of our rentals, a single family home, and we're going to exchange this summer and buy like a multifamily. So, within that'll be our first like multifamily property that we will own.
Whenever I hear people I've never considered that, and whenever I hear people talk about multifamily, it always makes so much sense when they're living in one of them while one, proximity, you're just right there, and anyone who's done a renovation knows how much easier it is when you're on site. But two, then once you start renting it, it's like someone else is just paying for your mortgage too.
Yeah,
It
for sure.
seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah, and my husband and I have always had like long-term goals. We don't think like short-term wise. So I think if you're investing in real estate, you really have to think long-term, which is kind of what we did with our cabin. We're like, oh, this property's gonna appreciate down the road and we'll have it forever. We bought it so that I really wanted something that our kids could create memories in and like look back on that
Yeah.
cabin. So even though I'm not cash flowing now, maybe in a couple years I will be, but just owning it and like having that long-term investment. And like I said, if I had waited and not bought then and there, I don't know if it would still been
Right.
attainable for us right now with the insurance, because I don't think I could get the new insurance policy like I have now. So our insurance
Right.
could be 4 times as much, and
Yeah.
I think our payment would easily be double what it is.
This is what I find is hard to measure though, right? Because I think so one of my good friends is also my real estate agent here in North Carolina. And we were at dinner the other night and I was like, I think it might be time to sell our cabin in Boone because Helene hit us hard. Now there's forest fires, like, and
Mm,
it's super saturated. And it's just like the numbers are not making as much sense as they once did. And she was like, do not sell it. She was like, it's the long term appreciation. There's not going to be that much land. There's not like that is where the payoff is going to come, but it's hard to measure that. It's such a gamble. It's such a, okay, I believe you because you're a real estate agent. You probably know better than me, but I can't crunch those numbers now to figure out like, what is this? You know what I mean? I find
mhm.
that, I'm sure other people too, but I find that to be the hardest to like figure out if you're doing the right thing or knowing what your next move is.
Right. So I started I've been tracking my cash flow on my long term rentals, and I'm like, okay, like this property it's the one we're selling is in an HOA and has a really expensive monthly HOA, and that's like
Mhm.
hurting my cash flow. But I've
Okay.
had a really good tenant in there for 8 years, so it's kind of like we've been like keeping it mostly because he's been great and living there. But
Yeah.
finally, I'm like, this makes sense for us to sell this year. Like, let's just pull the plug and do it. It's maybe not a great time to sell it,
Yeah.
for the market, but we're gonna get what we can out of it, and just I'm hoping to like double my cash flow, which will then help pay for the cabin itself, and that kind of thing.
Yep.
But I think if you're gonna sell anything, then you have to look at, well, what can I buy with that, especially if you have like a low interest rate.
Right, and that's what I find tricky. So I've never done a 1031 exchange, but I've been talking to a lot of people about this because I mean, once you own real estate, it's like if you sell it at a gain, you're paying a significant amount in capital gain. So it makes sense. Okay, I'm going to reinvest it. But now is such a bad time to reinvest it because the interest rates are so high that I'd
Right.
be basically doubling my interest rate if I sold it and reinvested it. There also are so many. What does it look like in California for a 1031 exchange? Because there's so many rules about timeline that makes it really hard
I
to pull
think
off.
it's federal, isn't it federal? I thought the 1031
Oh,
was
maybe.
it. So we have when you
You
do
would
it,
know better than me.
I well, I don't know. I don't know how it is in the other states, but I'm pretty sure it's consistent because you can exchange through state to state. But
Oh, yeah.
it's
And it's
once
a
you
federal capital gains tax, so that would make
yeah.
sense, yeah.
So you have once you've closed escrow on your first property, you have 45 days to identify 3 potential properties, and you from that closing date, you have another 180 days to close escrow on whichever properties, but it has to be 1 to 3 of those ones that you have identified.
Okay, I thought it was 90 days, so that window and maybe that's where there's some state differences, I'm not sure, but
Yeah,
that's where that window felt so challenging to
yeah,
identify another one in this kind of market that you would feel comfortable investing
right.
in. It just feels hard to do.
So I'm yeah, so my tenant moves out, and then I'm gonna have a couple weeks where I gotta fix it up to put it on the market, and I'm hoping within that window that maybe I can open escrow or make offers on properties before I even
Mhm.
have sold mine. So then I'm
Yeah.
kind of planning ahead. I have had clients that have waited to the night before to identify like their last property,
Oh
and I'm
my
like, I
gosh.
don't even wanna be there. So
Yeah.
yeah, and there you can do like reverse exchanges and stuff like that, which I haven't done. But this is our first exchange ourself and our first time selling one of our own properties. So it's we've bought together, but this is our first time selling, my husband and I.
Yeah, I really wanna have someone on who's done a 1031 and can talk us through it, which feels very nerdy and probably half the people would tune out and be like, "No," but anyone who's thinking about doing that, these are the questions. I just had a conversation the other day with fellow cabin owners at their cabin where we were getting into the, like, nuts and bolts of this because all of that matters the first time that you're thinking about actually selling and
Mhm.
reinvesting, and it's so complicated.
Yeah,
Which
my
yeah.
my uncle told me when I was young, he said, "You never wanna sell real estate, you only wanna acquire it." So once you're kinda in I've
Mhm.
taken that with a grain of salt. I'm like, "Okay, you never wanna, like." I see people who own real estate and sell it, and, it's a rental property, they don't do an exchange, like, they've cashed out, but then a couple years later, they're like, "Man, I should have done that," because now they can't go back and buy that property
Right.
again. So, like, I think, like I said before, like, we look at real estate, like, long term, and whatever we buy, it's like our long-term goals, like, we can pass this down to our kids will benefit from this,
Yeah.
or you wanna keep doing exchanges to kinda move up those properties and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay, that's really smart. What other good advice has your family with extensive real estate experience offered you that you can share with us?
Well, my grandpa said location, location, location.
Yeah. Yep.
That's a good one.
That's you can't change that.
I know, I wish my grandfather was alive more when I had been older so then I could have
Yeah.
used, kinda gone for him advice, but I think he took risks when he was young, and probably sometimes you look at stuff and you're buying stuff and you don't realize down the road, you're like, "Wow, that was a really good investment." Like, I didn't really know it
Yeah.
at the time. Like, when we bought during the recession, my mom was like, "Oh, that place is overpriced." And now I'm like, "Well, it's doubled in value now." So
Yeah.
it wasn't overpriced back then when I bought it.
This is the biggest challenge of real estate, I feel like. It's just in the moment you never know and you're constantly guessing what the market's going to do. I can only imagine as a real estate agent that you get asked all of the time by your clients. Okay, well when should I sell? When should I do this? Can you give us an overview of where the market's at right now? Probably your least favorite question, but as best as you can without being a fortune teller, where are we at now and like where do we are we hopefully going?
Okay, so well, I mean, it's so hyper local and interest
Yeah.
rates have fluctuated so much. I mean, interest rates have basically been steady for the last 2 years. So I
Yeah.
haven't seen a lot of like swing there. But for us, we're just coming onto the spring market, which tends to be at the higher price point of the year seasonally. So yeah, real estate's always higher in the spring, beginning of summer for us, and then it's lower, slower in the wintertime. So if you're someone that's thinking of selling, like I think now is the prime time to get it on the market. For us, it gets really hot in the summer, and the market seems to slow down in July. Which for me, I'm selling my rental, and I would have liked to put it on the market now, but I'm working with my tenant and his schedule and works
Yeah.
for him. So I was like, ugh, so I'm probably selling it a little bit later than I would have liked. But
Yeah.
again, it is what it is. We're just going to sell it for what we can get for it, kind of thing, whatever
Yep.
the so the interest rates might be up or down then. But yeah, I think it's just an individual if the time's right for them. But again, looking at real estate as a long term, not the short term. And then I think you do need people on your side to say, like, go for it. You should go for it. So when I bought my cabin, I had really good clients that the husband had grown up in the area, in Lake Almanor area, and they have a cabin on the west side of the lake. And he was kind of pretty much one of the only people that was like, go for it kind
Yeah.
of thing. And so I think you kind of need that cheerleader for you
Yeah.
when you're making that risky decision. Because a lot of people will be like, oh, you shouldn't buy a cabin, just rent when you go up there.
Right. Right. Well, this is why I think it's so helpful when you have family in real estate because my family has zero experience in real estate other than they were big advocates of buying your primary home because otherwise
Mm.
all you're left with is a pile of receipts, as I was told very often growing up. But nobody viewed it as an investment opportunity. So when I bought my first cabin, like I remember it was very much frowned upon and I was making like bad decisions financially. And then only now, right, again, 10 years later can I look back and be like, okay, actually that was a good decision. But those
Right.
cheerleaders, family members who've seen that and even pass something down and show you can be
Mhm.
such a value add versus some people are literally experiencing the opposite, which is like telling you not to do it, that it's a bad decision.
So I feel
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's kind of where your network comes into play, and you hear it all the time, like surround yourself with
Yes.
people who are where you want to be, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I definitely think if you're thinking about buying, or you really need to surround yourself with other people that are, real estate investors
Yes.
that are doing what you want to do.
Yeah. And this is where going back to the first thing that we talked about, having that community of other people who are in this world is valuable, not just for making you feel less alone when like a guest leaves a mess in your place and you want to message your best cabin bestie and be like, oh my gosh, you'll never believe what happened. More than that, it's like actually seeing what other people are doing and helping you get the bravery and the knowledge and the skills to actually make some of those similar moves.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I got a lot of inspiration from other cabin owners, once I
Yeah.
created my Instagram page.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm so grateful for all the real estate insight because I feel like I don't get to talk about that enough. But I
Mhm.
do want to pivot a little bit because I was
Okay.
looking at your properties. And one of the things that I noticed, and this is very rare, I think we've only talked to one other person who's done this, but you on your link tree on Instagram, you link to events and photo shoots booking and like media production. So you use the A frame for not just hosting guests as a short term rental, but you also list it actively for photo shoots. I'm curious what your experience has been like with that.
I haven't had anything come through Peerspace, but
Okay.
I'm definitely open to it. I know there's other cabin owners. That there's one cabin in Utah, and she's had this clothing brand that uses her cabin all the time, and I buy from that merchandiser from that company, and I'm like, I
Yeah.
recognize when I go shopping, I like recognize that cabin in the background. So I would
Yeah.
love to do more media and more photo shoots like that. I think because we're such kind of more a remote area, it's
Yeah.
not, it's not top of mind when people are searching. But I'm definitely open to whatever revenue I can create with our
Yeah.
cabin.
I mean, as someone who runs a video production company, I have definitely used Peerspace and Gigster. I mean, just last week, our shoot in New York City, we saw the place where we were supposed to shoot and we got, initial photos and we are like, oh, this is not going to work. And so we're just looking from a distance and we're like, okay, what else can we find? And one time we did a shoot that had a vintage 70s feel to it. We were trying to do like a flashback of like, oh, when he was a kid. And then And so we had to find a place with a vintage feel. I feel like there's a market for that because you can't just rent a studio space and like turn it into a vintage A-frame. But if
Yeah.
you're shooting something with that feel, finding a place like that. But the hard part is that night stays are normally 4 p.m. to like 10 or 11 a.m., right?
Mhm.
Or 3 in the afternoon to the morning. And so you'd have to book it for twice as long or because you would want to shoot midday likely when there's light. So I was just curious about the logistics of how folks make that work.
Yeah, I would well, I think I had blocked it out, so in the summertime, I wouldn't do pier space and, like, by the hourly, but our slow season, when I don't have anybody there, I would open it up for, 9 AM to 5
Right.
PM if you wanted to book it for the whole day, that wouldn't be
Right.
a problem. I
Right,
think
and the price is $100 an hour, so if you booked it even for, like, 4 hours, let's say,
Right,
that's more than the cost of a night stay
right,
theoretically, so it would be
right,
worth it. Yeah,
right. So, yeah, I just posted it just to see, like I said, whatever revenue I could get from it, I was open to it. So, I've done exchanges with photographers, but nobody, not like a company that used it
yeah.
strictly for media yet, but I'm open to it if there's businesses that want to.
But I feel like often the people who book it is the photographers, because ours has been in a couple brand things, but it was the photographer who's owning the shoot, so
Yeah,
they're in charge of finding and same with our company, like, we're the client isn't actually looking for the space, they're hiring us to do all that creative work, and so we're usually the ones who are booking that space, yeah.
right, right.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Okay, you
Mhm.
also have a 3D view on your website, which I don't know that I've seen anyone else do. It doesn't surprise me because you're a real estate agent, so I feel like that's common when you're listing houses. How
Right.
hard is that to create?
So my photographer did all that. I used
Yeah,
initially when I first launched, I used my real estate photographer. So they include like they can do the 3D virtual where you like walk through, and that's a Matterport camera that they use.
yeah,
Um, so I thought that was really cool. I know a lot of times pictures, especially if you do close-up pictures, you can't get a feel of like what the space is. And our space is 3 levels, so I wanted to make sure people
yeah,
knew how it was set up so they their expectations were met when they arrived. So then we do have that like flat 2D layout as well, but I like the 3D because then you can really see like how much space is between the furniture, like how the kitchen is laid out, that kind of thing.
yeah.
I don't even know how many people have actually viewed it. I did have somebody book from a Facebook national park group earlier this year, and I sent him my virtual tours because he didn't see like my Airbnb page or anything like that.
Mhm.
So I had to send him all. So it was really cool. It's really nice to have those like videos and
Right.
walkthroughs.
Well, I feel like that's the biggest place that guests can feel let down. I'm saying this mostly from my own experience as an Airbnb guest is when you show up to a space and the feeling or the flow of the space does not at all match what you had imagined when you saw the photos. And so it feels like a 3D space or Airbnb doesn't let you do videos. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I feel
Mhm.
like if you could do a walkthrough video on Airbnb, that would help so much with that.
Yeah, because via VRBO, you can upload your videos there.
Right.
So that was I used the real estate photographer initially, and then now I've since used, other lifestyle photographers to
Yeah.
get, more of those intimate photos, close-up photos.
If you're dreaming about a cabin build, or are in the midst of a build, or you just bought a place and are getting ready to host for the very first time, regardless of where you are, sometimes you just need a little help along the way. Shared experiences from someone who's been there, advice from someone who's learned a lot of lessons the hard way. That's me. Or a cheerleader as you finish up. All of these reasons are exactly why I started offering cabin consultations to our Instagram followers and friends who could use some specific one-on-one help. I can't promise to solve all your problems, but I can promise to be transparent about our build costs and process, our organization and project management systems, our favorite and least favorite tools for renting, how we market, and how we found ourselves with almost 80,000 Instagram followers and 100% occupancy in our first year of hosting at Cozy Rock. So if that sounds like it might help you, feel free to visit us at staycozycabin.com or on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and sign up for a time to chat there. Tell us about the renovation process of your A-frame. What condition was it in when you got it, and how much work did you have to put into it to get it where it is now?
So they had a lot of cute updates. I think the people that owned it before, they'd only owned it for like a couple years, but I think she was an interior designer. So like they had put the real hardwood floors down. There's some
Mhm.
custom furniture pieces, like our dining room chairs that I think she had made. Had the red fridge. So
Wait, did it come fully furnished?
it came with some of the furniture. So
Okay.
when I made it was a super competitive market back then, so I had put in my offer that they could leave whatever they desired. They could leave trash, I don't care.
Yeah.
So they took out some stuff, but they left some other stuff. So like the dressers were there. I used their mattresses because the mattresses were new. The beds downstairs were there. So the biggest thing we did though was downstairs in our lower level, our walkout basement. It was a laundry room. We only had one bathroom, one full bathroom, and so my husband was like, "We need two bathrooms." So
Yeah.
I converted that laundry room to a second full bathroom. The biggest, yeah, our biggest renovations was to that walkout basement.
Yeah.
I had drywalled it. They had some weird metal. I think it was like HVAC metal or something on the
Huh.
ceiling, and
Oh, yeah,
so
that's gone. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the pictures as you're talking about it. Yeah, the ceiling looks really nice.
yeah, so we drywalled all the
Yeah.
downstairs, and I made the laundry closet as well. So we converted the laundry room to a full bathroom, and then I made the laundry closet down there as well. So most of our renovation budget was down there.
Yeah.
I probably spent like 50 to 60,000 just down there, adding that
Mm.
bathroom and everything down there. I did splurge on the tile and stuff like that because it was
Yeah.
a small space. I thought I could
Yep.
splurge there. So
Yep.
maybe I probably wouldn't have splurged on having white tile. I probably wouldn't do that again
Yeah.
in a rental, but it is what it is. I mean, it looks cute. And then
Mhm.
I did a lot of otherwise throughout the cabin, I just mostly did a lot of safety things. And our loft railing was pretty low, so I added another 2x8 beam to get it to
Yep.
meet code. I added like handrails outside because there was no handrails. So I did a lot of safety things like that. I beefed up the railing of our deck. So I actually went above code. It was code then, but I actually wanted it taller than code. So I did the railing. I've actually like redone the railing like twice already, but so it is where it is now. And I did a lot of just improvements, just kind of beefing it up for safety wise. I redid the electrical and that kind of thing. And I did some new fixtures, that kind of thing, and some new furniture. But a lot of
That's
it
the
was,
unsexy. The safety stuff is the really unsexy where you can spend a lot of money, but boy, does it buy you peace of mind. I mean, not to mention safety for guests, which obviously is important, but even just for peace of mind, knowing, okay, there's going to be kids running around on that deck and I don't have to worry about it.
yeah, so I follow, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name, but Breezeway, he's with Breezeway. He's always posting about safety and short term rentals. And I think he's
Oh,
a great resource for people, even like long term rentals you can gain from him. I mean, they say like the number one lawsuits with the short term rentals is slips and falls. So I tried to, I made sure I didn't rent it out before I had those handrails. So that
wow.
was the last thing I did. I wanted to make sure I had checked all those boxes.
I don't know if that would be good for me to follow or bad because my anxiety would be so triggered if every time I opened up my phone, it was like, here's something else you should be worrying about. Like, my brain does not need any help with things to worry about. But at the same time, I also want to keep myself as protected as possible.
Yeah, I mean, he makes a lot of good points. I mean, I think it's good to follow because there's a lot of little things he says you can do just like putting like, like reflective tape down
Yes.
to make sure, people are aware. I put fire extinguishers on every
Yes.
level. All new smoke alarms. I put new smoke alarms in all my other rentals too after following him because I was like, oh, you need to replace them every 10 years. So,
Yes.
I
I
mean, I
feel
think
like Chrissy from McJoppa the Hut is a good follow. Not she doesn't necessarily harp about safety stuff, but she just is very good at the practical stuff, which I am not as good at. I'm like, I'm thinking about the fun. I'm an Enneagram 7, so I'm like, what's going to make this stay more fun? What's going to be like bring joy to people? And she also is very joyful, but you do have to think about, oh, okay, what happens when the power goes out? Like, all of those small details that are again, less sexy and less fun, but make a huge difference.
yeah, and I think my background in real estate, we're always worried about, oh, if somebody gets hurt, they're going to sue you. So I'm like, it's never worth it, like a real estate transaction or a stay, if somebody's gonna get hurt or try and sue you. So
This how do you think about being on water? Because we have one property on water, and there was a recent Airbnb stay that hit the news
mm,
where someone or multiple people in the family drowned because they couldn't swim, and it got deeper faster than they thought. So they got in the water, and then they sued the Airbnb owner for not telling them that it got deeper faster, and multiple people in their family died. And this has obviously been something I'm thinking about ever since because we're on water. Like, we can't protect against people who don't know how to swim. Do we put signs up, swim at your own risk? Like, how do you approach the safety part of just being on water?
I'm not lakefront. We have a view of the lake, but I'm not lakefront, but we do have
Okay.
amenities within our country club that we have, like, private beaches that people can go to. Gosh, I mean, when we were looking, my husband and I discussed it, we're like, "We don't want waterfront, we don't want a hot tub." I didn't want, like, the drowning risk because we have little
Yeah.
kids,
Yeah.
and, like, drowning was, like, near and dear, one of the most preventable, cause of deaths in children and infants, so, for that reason, I don't know that I'd ever want a rental that was, like, with that risk. I've kinda
Okay. Well,
become
you're talking to someone with a waterfront and 2 hot tubs. So now I'm gonna be worrying about this too.
well, so for my but now I'm like, I wish I had a hot tub. I would
I
totally
know.
be down to add a hot tub, but I can't find anyone local to service it now. So
That's the problem, yes.
I think that initial investment, I was so fear-based, but now I'm like, "Okay, I've been hosting for a while, maybe I can, like, take those risks."
Yeah.
Um, I think, like, if you're gonna have waterfront, I would have, like, the life rings, making sure you have, like, life rings, making sure they know there's no lifeguard on duty. I don't know if you need postage, maybe follow that
Yeah.
guy Breezeway and see what his protocol is for, waterfronts. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of that is common sense, but like I said, are those people gonna win in court when they sue that
Right.
owner?
And that's what I haven't followed up on it, so I don't know if they won in court, but I do remember seeing that and reading it and being like, "Oh my gosh, they can't swim. Like, what are they doing in the water?" Like,
Well, you've heard of that. I mean, there's other drownings where people are like, "Oh, yeah, the kid drowned, but he didn't swim." I was like, "Well, why was he in the pool then if he couldn't swim?"
right. Right. We have life vests, but we can't make them put them on if they don't know how to swim.
So I think maybe having the life rings, maybe you need to put no lifeguard on duty or something like that,
Yeah.
whatever the safety is. Or depending on how the property's set up, if you can fence the water. Obviously, if it was a pool, it should have a safety fence, but it's not if you're on a public lake or public body of water, ocean, it's not. But
Right.
maybe if you had like a raised deck that you could put like a baby gate on or fenced
Oh,
off.
that's a good idea. We do have a raised deck, and the back door is the only I mean, you can go walk around the house, but if we put a gate on that.
Or I have baby gates up so guests can put them up if they want to, like mostly just for our stairs going up and down because we do have a spiral staircase. So I leave gates that people can get off and our fireplace because we bought it and my son, he wasn't even 2. So I've kind of it wasn't my plan to be family friendly, but just kind of naturally having the kids and getting all the things I needed for my kids,
Right.
I started realizing that I'm hosting more families than
Yeah,
I had anticipated. So then I started marketing as a family friendly spot
right. Because if
because
you
I have
have all this stuff there anyway, why not? You're, like, a couple steps ahead on that front.
right, yeah.
And in the
So
low season, it's helpful to have all that to attract folks who, when you might not otherwise be busy.
yeah, so I guess you could say my guest avatar kind of changed of what I had envisioned for my place.
What
I
did
thought
you envision originally?
I thought I would get more couples and more groups
Yeah,
that were like coming to visit the national park and like adventuring. So, but I got more like large, like 5-person families that
yeah.
had some of them have like a range of children, either from like
Mhm.
small children to teenagers. And then less, I mean, I hardly get any like single couples. I think my place is too big for single couples, but I do get some groups occasionally, but mostly it's like families or two small families.
Yeah.
So, and I know a lot of some guests last year said it was their first time traveling with their young child.
Mm.
So I know having my amenities helped.
Yeah. It's interesting because we heavily market towards couples and never plan to be family friendly at all. We have a hot tub, we have a fire or wood stove in the middle of the cabin. We have a loft. Like, none of this feels family friendly. But after 4 years, there are people who have gotten engaged there and, like, now have gotten married and have a baby and want to come back. And that I love repeat guests. I love being a part of, like, their life story. And so now it's like, okay, do we do we make ourselves like a little bit more family friendly for our repeat guests who now have kids? I feel very torn on this.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I guess it depends on what your guest, your majority of your guests are. But yeah, like having the baby gates, I have like the children utensils, the booster seats, the
Yep.
sound monitor. I do have a pack and play. So I don't think my cabin itself is like family friendly because we have two sets of stairs.
Right.
Um, but I mean, I have set it up so they can keep the kids off the stairs. They can keep them away from the fireplace.
Yeah. The
So
amenities are family friendly.
yeah.
Yeah. This is how because I think about our ideal is couples with a dog or 2. And so we have all of these amenities. We have like a high-end dog bed and like a whole basket of like treats and poop bags and different kinds of leads and like have made it very inviting for them. And now I'm like, "Oh crap, do we need like more stuff for kids too?"
Yeah,
Are
so
you
we are
dog friendly?
not I'm not pet friendly. It's actually we have a dog, but our dog's never been to the cabin.
Ah,
So we are in an HOA, and our HOA has strict rules, and one of
that's
those
right.
is
I had this on my list to ask you
Mhm.
about.
So
Mhm.
we can dive into that all day. So our HOA says no pets allowed. So I
In the
have had
whole neighborhood?
just for renters.
Okay.
Oh, but there's strict rules, like your dog has to be on a leash or there's like a $200 fine. So yeah, there's strict rules on the country for the HOA. We're in a country club, a gated community. So obviously somebody can bring a service animal, but they don't
Right.
want pets for renters for pets. So probably someone a while back ruined that for everybody
Yep.
else kind of thing. So and if there are pets, owners have pets, they want the dogs on leashes. And my yard's not fenced. And I'm on an incline, so and my place is so small. I mean, I feel like it's small, but I feel like a dog running around. I don't feel like it's really like pet friendly to begin
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the HOA for a minute, because
Mhm.
one of my properties is in an HOA, so I
Oh,
have a lot of thoughts and opinions. Did
okay.
you know when I mean, I'm sure you knew when you bought that it was in an HOA. Did you know how much that would impact your life as a rental at that time? Or was it just like, "Oh, it's in an HOA, that'll be extra fees?"
Yeah, no, I didn't anticipate. Yeah, no, I didn't anticipate. And our HOA, our annual assessment has gone up so much, almost $1,000 a year since 4 years since we bought it. Like exponentially has increased so much. In the fines, I haven't had a guest get a fine, which I would have had to pay, but they have tried to fine us. They have fined us for like parking at the boat ramp when we didn't have a boat trailer, trying don't not rolling in your trash can on the time. And there's some pretty hefty fines associated with all these. So one thing I did last year is I joined our fees and fines committee. And then so I could because there's a lot of the majority of people in our neighborhood are second homeowners, like 75% of the homes in there are second homeowners. And a lot of
Yep.
people like to rent those out for, a little bit of income flexibility. But a lot of people weren't paying attention to what's going on in the HOA.
Yeah.
So before this year, we had big changes, but last year, for example, um, when somebody comes to stay, they would have to pay $150 renter fee to the HOA, and I would have to pay an additional $50 to the HOA. So basically, it was $200 a stay, and that was fixed if they were there for 2 nights or like 10 nights.
Wow.
So it really ate into my profit, I would
Yeah.
say. I I could basically I pay more to my HOA in my annual assessments and my renter fees than I do the county and TOT tax and property taxes. There's almost the same amount. So the HOA definitely has affected like my profit.
Yeah.
Maybe I could be just about I would probably almost be breaking even if I didn't have those renter fees. So this year they changed it to be a nightly fee instead of like per stay. So
Yep.
it's per diem, which I feel is better because most of my stays are 3 to 4 nights. So it makes the majority of my stays a little bit cheaper. And
Do
now
you pay this fee or do the guests pay it?
well, California changed the civil code. So now the civil code is basically for lodging, short term lodging, hotels. When you're looking online in California, you have to see the total displayed price of the stay. And the renters can't pay outside that booking. So now they changed it that the hosts have to pay that $40 a night stay. So the
Oh,
renters don't pay any. So I think that's better because nobody likes having those additional
right.
fees, and I
But
couldn't.
then yeah. You have to navigate, do I adjust that my prices for that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of people were complaining this year in the HOA, and I was like, "I've just added $40 to my nightly stay." For the majority of my stays, it made it cheaper, and I did kinda cut down on my nightly stay when I added that on, so I'm trying to be kinda comparable to how it was before, if not a little cheaper,
Yeah,
and I like the fact that it's not an extra fee that they pay, that
right,
the guest
right.
pays.
Because that's a
Every
huge deterrent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So but yeah, if you're in an HOA, I would definitely get involved. I did create a closed Facebook group for members only, and I am the admin. I created the group. We now have like 400 members, and they have to
How
like
big
type.
is your neighborhood?
We have like 1,600 lots, 1,600 parcels.
Wow.
It's big,
Okay.
big. Yeah, it's a big parcel. So I only have like maybe what, a
Yeah.
third of the owners, maybe a quarter.
Still a lot though.
It's still a lot. So I feel like that Facebook page just helps people become more aware of what the issues are. And
Yeah.
a lot of people are like, hey, we're having a meeting today. Please attend. When otherwise people wouldn't see it or wouldn't pay
Right.
attention.
Especially when because my neighborhood only has, like, 18 lots, so drastically different than yours.
Mhm.
But what that also means is that there's a lot of, like, gossiping and people, there were a couple people who lived there full time. So my first couple years were rough
Mhm.
until I got involved. I think that's the best advice. And now, like when I got involved, it's different because you have a say in it. You can voice the other side, and a couple other young people have bought properties and are also involved. And I feel like the tide of the HOA is shifting a little bit from like, oh, we're just venting about these young people who are renting, and more like problem solving of like, okay, how do we serve everyone in the neighborhood? Easier with 18 than 1600. But I just think your takeaway of getting involved is the right way to do it.
Yeah, so a lot of people were complaining, and I said, "Well, you can't just complain, like, do you have any solutions? Like, what's your solution?"
Right.
Like, the HOA says that the renters create more wear and tear for them, so what's the solution? Would you rather have, like, a per stay, a charge per stay or per diem? Like, what's fair for all parties? And, mm, I I think all the people on the board in those committees, like, they don't have rentals or
Yeah.
they don't rent
Yes.
their place out, so I think
Yeah.
it's really if I could get more people like me involved,
Yes.
and then they can share. Because I think, like, going back before, I think most of the owners in there that think I'm renting my place out think I'm making a lot of money
Right.
or just think
Right.
I'm using it to make money.
Yeah. Yeah. There's just a lot of misunderstanding. I think this is the answer in general. If more people with different life experiences were able to have those conversations, we just get a little bit closer to understanding why they feel the way they feel, why they're doing what they do, and get involved, basically, is the moral of that story.
Yep. So one of my tasks right now before our next committee meeting is I'm going to do some more research on other HOAs similar to ours and
Mm,
see what they charge for rentals. Another thing they started charging this year is a small permit fee to operate the rental in the country club, which the
yeah.
county doesn't charge permits. I know there's a lot of counties in California and
Yeah.
cities that charge permits, but
Our
our
town does that in Maine.
okay,
Yeah,
okay,
it's not
so
a lot, and I
there's-
think it's smart. Like, we don't have an HOA in Maine, but we have the town who regulates it, and
okay,
honestly, nothing that they're asking of us is unreasonable. It doesn't sound like your HOA where I'm getting fined for trash cans or things like that. It's more just, make sure you have someone who can be there in 20 minutes if something's going wrong. Make sure that, you have fire extinguishers, all these things that make it safe and legal, and to me, it feels like we should be doing these anyway. So if you're gonna require me to check some boxes and make sure I'm doing it, I'm okay with that, and pay a
yeah.
small fee.
Yeah, I'm on board with the safety aspect, like I said before, but yeah, our HOA hasn't really they're not looking at it as safety. They're just I
Right,
mean, mostly for people to follow the rules, but some of the rules aren't really
right.
safety. Your place isn't more safe if you don't have a dog or your
Right.
dog's on a leash or your
That's
trash
right.
can. It's not
Yeah.
safety, it's more control and aesthetics, but it's something we need to work on. So, and yeah, our annual assessments in the HOA have gone up exponentially, and they're basically in the next 5 years supposed to still increase because I guess our reserves are low.
Yeah.
So that's not something when you buy a property that you can anticipate, that
No.
extra expense. So I know for a lot of reasons or for a lot of investors, they say don't buy in an HOA. So
I would never do it again. It's just the lack of control. Because when it comes to what we were talking about earlier with real estate, there's so much kind of attempts at forecasting with no certainty of what it's actually going to look like. And so one way that you can remove even more certainty is to introduce the element of an HOA,
Mhm.
unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, for us, it's really a bummer because our country club has the nicest beaches and the nicest amenities on the lake. So basically, you have to pay to
Right.
play. You have to pay to
Yep.
play, but there's pros and cons, right?
Yeah.
And we're the only gated. Well, we're one of the only gated communities up there, so we get a lot of more safety from having those
Yeah.
gates. So it's toss up because there's not a lot of nice public beaches on our lake, and we have the nicest ones. So
Yeah. Yeah.
there's trade-offs. But yeah,
Yep.
I would probably think twice about an HOA. Or the big thing with
Or just
our
do your
HOA,
research.
I know, our HOA has private roads, so we have to pay to maintain all those roads, and that's where the biggest expense comes
Yep.
from.
Though, what I will say is when Hurricane Helene hit our area, our road, the only road going into our neighborhood of 18 houses, was completely washed out. And so nobody could get in or out. And our HOA had that fixed in less than a week. And the main public roads, obviously the State Department of Transportation was completely overwhelmed. And so that was a moment where I was like, I was certain we'd have to cancel all reservations for a month. And they just got their shit together and like had that road fixed in no time. And I was like, okay, this is the advantage of having an HOA where you can take it into your own hands and not just have to wait for the state to do something. So there we go. We've added one pro, a whole
Yeah,
bunch
yeah,
of
yeah.
cons and one pro of an HOA.
Yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons, but I think, yeah, individually, if you're looking to buy, definitely take a hard look at the HOA, the documents, the financials, and
Yeah.
where they're headed,
Yeah. Yeah. Kendra, thank you so much for joining me for this.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. And if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.